Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're preparing for the digital ST, you've probably come across the command of evidence questions and maybe even found them a bit tricky. These questions ask you to identify where a particular idea or claim is supported in the text. And let's face it, they can be a real challenge. Many students struggle with pinpointing the exact evidence that backs up their answers, which can lead to unnecessary stress and lost points. But don't you worry, in today's video, I'm going to break down the exact steps you need to follow to conquer these questions with confidence. I will show you how to quickly locate the key pieces of evidence and how to avoid the common traps that so many students fall into. And stick around until the end because I've got a special surprise that can give you an extra edge on this question type. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. It is something most students overlook, but it could make all the difference for you. So let us dive in and start mastering command of evidence questions together. So what exactly is this command of evidence thing? Well, the name says it all. In these questions, you are asked to find the best piece of evidence from the text to support a claim. Sounds simple, right? But here's where most students stumble. The answer isn't always obvious, and you're racing against the clock with just 1 minute and 10 seconds per question. You see, this question type requires you to think critically, interpret, evaluate, and even combine information from the text. It is not just about reading quickly, but understanding it deeply. And trust me, I get it. It is easy to get lost in all the details or pick up the wrong option and lose those precious points. But don't worry, I've got your back. We will begin by breaking down the steps needed to tackle this question type, and then we will apply those steps to a series of questions, starting with an easy one, progressing to a medium difficulty question, and finally tackling a hard difficulty question. Now, before we go ahead and understand the steps involved in attempting this question type, let's see the two types of command of evidence textual type you will find on the test. There are two types of evidences that you will be asked for. One will be literary and the second is scientific evidence. So literary evidence, what are they and what are the scientific evidence? We'll be seeing the examples for both of these types. And now let us go ahead and understand the steps. So these are the steps that we need to take to attempt this question type. This is a 5-step strategy approach. Let's understand the first one. The first one is extremely important, even though it sounds very simple. It says read the question stem. This is the first step, and why is it so important? Because this is the step where you will know what approach you need to take for the question type. Right? When you read the question stem, you will know the type of question you're dealing with, and accordingly, you can devise your strategy. Here, in this particular type, it's not just about knowing the type that you're going to deal with, but it's also about what are you going to do with the question. Here, you will be asked either support the particular claim or hypothesis, or you have to weaken it. So you really need to understand the question stem as to what is it that you're being asked to do for this particular type. The second step is identifying the claim or hypothesis. Like I said, the question stem will tell you that you need to support or weaken a certain claim or hypothesis mentioned in the text. So now that you have read the question step, you should move to understanding what that claim or hypothesis is. Once you have identified it, you have to rephrase that claim or hypothesis in your own words. You don't want to refer back to the text again and again. You don't want to reread the text again and again, right? For that reason, you will have to rephrase the claim or hypothesis in simple words which you can retain while you're reading your options and trying to eliminate them. So once you have identified the claim or hypothesis, you will have to rephrase the claim or hypothesis in your words, in simpler words. The next step is that identify what we need in a correct option. Now you know what the claim or hypothesis is. As per the question stem, if you're supposed to support it, what is it that your correct option should state in order to pick that up as your right answer? Remember, till this step, you've still not gone ahead and read your options, right? So you have to have an understanding as to what the correct option should ideally state for you to pick it up as your right option. Once you have gotten that understanding, move on to the option elimination stage, and that's the final step where you eliminate your options to identify your correct answer. Remember, we are not directly looking for the correct option. We are trying to find the wrong ones first and then move on to identifying the correct one. Right? Elimination is much easier than picking up the option that is absolutely correct. 100% accurate option, identifying it is going to be a challenge, right? So try and identify all the options that are incorrect, and then whatever you're left with is going to be your correct answer. Now, this 5-step strategy approach looks simple, correct? It looks like you can definitely follow it. But what you need to know is how to implement all these steps. When you look at a question, how do you go about implementing all these steps is what we need to learn. Right? So the next few examples that we are going to see are going to tell you more about how to implement these steps. Let us go ahead and take up our first example. Now you can see that the difficulty level of this question is easy, and here we are talking about a literary evidence. The first step was to read the question stem, correct? Now here let's go ahead and read this. Which quotation from Walia most effectively illustrates the claim? So the moment you see something like most effectively illustrates a claim, right? Maybe like just this part, you should know that you're dealing with command of evidence textual type. Illustrating a claim, supporting a claim, weakening a claim, these are the phrases that you will find in the question stem for command of evidence textual, right? And here the question stem talks about a quotation. You have to pick up a quotation. So basically the options will consist of certain quotations, and you have to pick up a quotation from Walia most effectively illustrates the claim. The claim is mentioned in the text. Right? So the mention of quotation should tell you that this is a literary evidence question type, and illustrates the claim should tell you this is command of evidence textual type. Now that we know the question stem, now that we know what we are supposed to do, let us go ahead and read the text. Now we are going to try and identify what the claim is. Let's read the text. Walia is a 1907 short story by L.A. Remember, I don't want to waste my time trying to pronounce this, right? The pronunciation is irrelevant in the whole exam. So just call this LA and read ahead. So we are talking about Walia, that's a short story written by LA. In the story, the author emphasizes that, now the author is emphasizing something, that the setting where the character V is reading is nearly silent. This is the claim, guys. This is the claim about the book. Correct? That where the character V is reading is nearly silent. That setting is silent. Now I have to support this claim. So let's rephrase the claim in simpler words. So basically an option that mentions the setting of where the character is reading and the setting has to be silent is going to be our correct option. So any option that says that the setting where V was reading is silent is our correct option. Alright, now with this understanding, we will move on to the next step, that is read the options and try to eliminate. Remember, I'm not trying to look for the correct options right away. I'm trying to eliminate some first. Let's read A. The hand in which he carried his book was getting stiff with cold. So we are talking about a hand, and that hand is getting cold. But he would not ask his mother to take the book from him. So it's more about the weather, right? It's cold over there, correct? Is it about the setting being silent? No. It's about how the weather was, right? So this option is irrelevant. This is irrelevant to the claim. Right? This is one of the reasons how you can eliminate options for this type. You will get irrelevant options which are totally not relevant to the claim that is made in the text. Let's go ahead and read B now. V was reading a huge, very huge book, almost half as large as himself. How huge the book is, right? This is what the option is telling us. This is again not about the setting being silent, right? So I will eliminate this. Again, the reason is going to be that it's irrelevant to the claim. Let's read C. We approached the window and examined the toys. So this is about we approaching a window and examining the toys, correct? Nowhere it's talking about the setting where V was reading, right? Because it doesn't even talk about the setting, it's again irrelevant, right? And you are left with D. That has to be your correct option. And now let's read it, okay? Everything in the room was quiet, setting. So quiet that the only thing to be heard was the rustling of the pages he turned. So this person is reading and the setting is quiet. This is exactly what the claim says, and this is exactly helping me to illustrate the claim. This is your correct option. So I hope you understood how we could eliminate the options very easily only when we have a better understanding of what the claim is, right? So I kind of had an idea of what the correct option should state. That idea came only when I understood the claim properly. So spend more time in understanding the claim and the reasons, the most common reason how you can eliminate options for this type is irrelevant. The option will simply be irrelevant to the claim or hypotheses mentioned in the text. Now this is your first question, the easy difficulty level question. We will be taking up one more easy difficulty level question, but that would be for scientific evidence. Remember, this is easy, so it was easier for me to eliminate my options. I understand that. But do not neglect this particular difficulty level. I've seen a lot of students not paying attention to the easy difficulty level questions and directly moving to the medium difficulty and the hard difficulty ones. But if you don't build your foundation with the help of these easy difficulty level questions, you will not perform better with the medium difficulty and the hard difficulty ones. So spend time with these easy difficulty questions so that your foundation is strong. All right. Now the next question is going to be on the scientific evidence type, and the difficulty level is going to be easy again. All right. So here is the next question. And as you can see, the difficulty level is easy, and this is a scientific evidence-based question. Now the first step is always the same. That is, read the question stem. Which finding, if true, would most directly support A's hypotheses? So the mention of supporting someone's hypotheses tells us that this is a command of evidence textual type. And here, because there's no mention of quotes, we know that this is a scientific evidence type. Now the second step is we read the text to identify where the hypothesis is mentioned. Let's read the text. Roasted green chiles are a popular ingredient in southwestern cuisine. So we are talking about roasted green chiles and that this is a popular ingredient in southwestern cuisine. But the traditional roasting method of burning propane is not environmentally friendly. So here, this is a popular ingredient, but the traditional roasting method is not environmentally friendly. There's a problem with the traditional method. Let's read ahead. To see if solar power could provide a better alternative, engineer K.A. and his team roasted batches of green chiles using... Okay, this is a very lengthy sentence, right? If you look at this, it's a very long sentence. If we continue reading it at one breath, we'll probably not understand this sentence and we'll end up reading it again. So why can't we just break it down at the very first place when we are reading it? So let's reread this sentence to show you how exactly you can break it down for your understanding purposes. To see if solar power could provide a better alternative. There's a comma, so let's take a pause. So what are we talking about now? We are talking about another method for roasting, right? Remember, the traditional roasting method is not environmentally friendly. So now what are we trying to see? We are trying to see if solar power can be a better alternative. And who is seeing this? Engineer K.A. and his team, right? They are trying to see if this is a better method. What did they do? Roasted batches of green chiles using between 38 and 42 heliostats. Take a pause again. So what did these people do? What did K.A. and his team do? They roasted batches of green chiles using heliostats, a certain number of heliostats. Now there's a which. So basically we have an explanation of heliostats, which are devices that concentrate sunlight. Now, these heliostats basically concentrate, they have sunlight, right? And K.A. and his team are trying to see if solar power can be a better alternative, right? What happened because of this? We will be knowing that in the later sentence. The team was successful in reaching the same roasting temperature used in traditional propane roasting. Take a pause again. So when the team tried using 38 and 42 heliostats to roast the green chiles, they were able to successfully reach the same roasting temperature as they reached in traditional propane roasting. But so something is changing here, right? So whenever you see a contradictory word coming up, pay extra attention because the plot is going to change. But what happened? They found that the propane yielded faster results. So there was one problem, but right, what was the problem? That using the propane, they were able to roast it quickly. They were able to roast the green chiles quickly compared to the sunlight use, the solar power. While the fastest solar roasted green chiles took 6 minutes, batches using propane took only 4. So this was the difference. What happened when they used the solar power, or when they were checking if solar power is a better alternative? They found that the solar power roasting was taking longer compared to propane. Now, A hypothesizes. Now, this is the hypothesis, and this is what we need to support. So, we will have to pay extra attention to this particular part. A hypothesizes that they can reduce the roasting time for solar roasted green chiles by using more heliostats. Now that we have identified the hypotheses, we are supposed to rephrase this hypothesis in simpler words, in our words, right? Now, what is the hypothesis saying? It's basically saying that if you use more heliostats, you will be able to reduce the roasting time for solar roasted green chiles, right? So in order to reduce the roasting time in the solar power usage, you'll have to use more heliostats. There's a possibility of this. Correct? And we have to support this. So any correct option that says that there was a reduction in time because of the increase in the number of heliostats used is going to be our correct option. Let us go ahead and try to eliminate our options now. Option A. The temperature inside the roasting drum is distributed more evenly when roasting green chiles with solar power than with propane. Now, this particular option is simply comparing the temperature distribution in solar power and with propane, right? It's simply comparing how temperature was distributed evenly. But tell me one thing, is the hypothesis even related to it? The hypothesis is about reducing the roasting time if more heliostats are used. It's not about how evenly the temperature is distributed, right? So this option can be eliminated because this is irrelevant. A very common reason to eliminate options for this type. Let's look at B. Attempts to roast green chiles using 50 heliostats yields results in fewer than 6 minutes. Now remember, we did talk about using more heliostats to reduce the time taken for roasting. In the text, they mentioned they used 38 and 42 heliostats. Here they are talking about 50, which means there is an increase here, right? In the text, they mentioned that they took 6 minutes. The fastest solar roasted green chiles took 6 minutes. Here they are taking fewer than 6 minutes. So there's a reduction here. So I already like this option. It's already supporting the hypothesis. But I will not directly mark this as the correct option and move ahead with the next question. I will have to eliminate the rest of the options. Guys, it's very crucial that you eliminate all your options and then reach your correct option. Let's look at C now. Green chile connoisseurs prefer the flavor of solar roasted green chiles. Okay, now I can just stop here. You know why? Because they're talking about the flavor. The flavor is not even discussed in the whole text. Forget about the hypotheses, right? So definitely the hypothesis is not discussing the flavor preferred. It's definitely not about that. So C is out and this is irrelevant, right? Again, the same reason for elimination. Let's look at D. The skins of solar roasted green chiles are easier to peel than the skins. Again, now stop. The comparison over here is about, peeling the skins. Which process will make it easier to peel the skins? It's again irrelevant to the hypothesis. The hypothesis is about reducing the time taken for roasting by increasing the number of heliostats used. right? So very clearly B is a correct option. D was also irrelevant, by the way, right? So by now, I'm sure you've understood how to implement or even how to read the texts, correct? And how to implement all the 5 steps that we saw in order to attempt command of evidence textual types. Now, these were the easy difficulty level questions that we took for both literary and scientific evidence. The next question that we take up is going to be of medium difficulty level. Let's go ahead and see that one now. Here's our difficulty level medium question, and this is a literary evidence question type. So let's follow the first step. Read the question stem. Which quotation from Loon Point most effectively illustrates the claim? So the mention of effectively illustrates tells us that this is command of evidence textual type, and quotation tells us that this is a literary evidence question type. Now let's go ahead and identify what that claim is in the text. Let's read the text for this. Loon Point is a 1912 poem by Amy Lowell, so A.L. In the poem, which presents a nighttime scene on a body of water. So what is happening in the poem? It's basically presenting a nighttime scene on a body of water. So A.L. describes an element of nature as an active participant in the experience, writing. This is the claim, guys. This is the claim right here. So what is the claim saying over here? So this person is describing an element of nature, and that element of nature is being an active participant. What is the meaning of being an active participant? It means that the natural element, like the moon, water, etc., is doing something or interacting with the scene in a way that suggests it is more than just a background detail. So whichever option talks about one of the natural elements in a way that it's not just a background detail, but it's doing something more than that, is going to be our correct option. It's almost as if the element has a role or presence in the action taking place, right? So this is what we are looking, or this is what we are trying to find in our correct option. So let's go ahead and start eliminating our choices now. Option A. Through the water, the moon writes her legends in light on the smooth wet sand. So by now you know that the quotations are going to be in a very poetic form because we are talking about a poem over here. The trick over here is that we have to not get lost in the poetic structure used over here. Try to grasp the overall meaning of these options, right? Don't try to get the literary meaning of every option. Now here in choice A, it's talking about moon, right? Moon writing, which is very active, right? It's trying to personify moon by saying that it's actively writing on the sand through the water. The moon is personified over here. By that I mean it's given human-like qualities, as if it's creating or influencing the scene. This makes moon an active participant in the scene. So I already like this option. It is talking about an element of nature that is an active participant. So let's go to B now and see if I can eliminate that. Softly the water ripples against the canoe's curving side. Now here the water is described, right? Here we are talking about water, and it's basically described as rippling against something. This describes an interaction, yes, but it does not personify the water. It does not really say what is that really important detail or an action taken by water, right? It does not personify the water or make it seem like an active participant with intention, right? So if you compare this water with the moon in the previous option, it's quite evident that moon is playing or doing something very actively compared to water, right? So B is definitely out because it's not making a personification of water as it was doing in the option A for moon. Let's look at C now. Or like the snow white petals which dropped from an overblown rose. Now this is a simile where it's making a comparison of something to petals falling, right? Which is more of a passive description of a natural process. It is not an active participation. It's happening on its own, right? There's no such active participation here. So C is also out because it's not talking about an active participation by an element of nature. D. But the moon in a wayward beauty is ever and always the same. Now, this describes the moon as an unchanging and beautiful thing. But it does not describe it as actively doing something within the scene. What is it doing? It's doing nothing, right? It's being in a certain manner, but it's not doing anything actively. So D is definitely out and A is a correct option because it's actively doing something, right? It's writing. Like, what can be more active than that, right? So again, the elimination, even for a question where poem was involved, was easier because I knew what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an element of nature which is actively participating in the whole experience, right? So A is a correct option for this question. Let's see another medium difficulty level question. So the first step remains the same, that is, read the question stem. Which statement, if true, would most directly support the student's claim? So support the claim means this is a command of evidence textual type. And we have to support whose claim? Student's claim. So let's go ahead and read the text to understand what the student's claim is. A student is examining a long, challenging poem that was initially published in a quarterly journal without explanatory notes. Take a pause here. So, the student is examining some long, challenging poem that was once published in a journal, in a quarterly journal, without explanatory notes. Then, later republished in a standalone volume containing only that poem and accompanying explanatory notes written by the poet. Now, later what happened? Later they republished this particular poem in a standalone volume. That is, that particular volume had only that poem, right? But this time the poem was accompanied by notes written by the poet, right? So earlier this poem was published in a quarterly journal along with other things, but no explanatory notes. But later the poem was published in a standalone volume where explanatory notes were also given. Now the student asserts that. Now this is where the student's claim is coming up, right? So pay extra attention to this. The student asserts that the explanatory notes were included in the republication primarily as a marketing device to help sell the standalone volume. Now that we have identified the claim, let's rephrase this and understand it better. The student says that the explanatory notes by the poet were added to the standalone volume as a marketing strategy so that people purchase the standalone volume, right? So the student in his claim is giving the reason of adding the explanatory notes. The reason is that they want to sell it, right? That is a marketing strategy. They want to sell it more, right? Okay, now with this understanding, let's understand what the correct option should consist of. So any option that talks about adding the explanatory notes in order to sell it to more readers or more audience is going to be our correct option. With this understanding, we'll go ahead and start eliminating our choices. A. The text of the poem as published in the quarterly journal is not identical to the text of the poem published in the standalone volume. Now this option is simply telling me that the text of the poem is different in the quarterly journal and the standalone volume. Is that my concern though? That's not my concern. All I want the correct options to say is that the notes, the explanatory notes are added so that the standalone volume could be sold to more readers, right? The text is different or not is simply irrelevant to me, right? I just want to talk about selling standalone volume to more people because of the explanatory notes. Let's go to B now. Many critics believe that the poet's explanatory notes remove certain ambiguities of the poem and makes it less interesting as a result. Now this option tells me what happens when the explanatory notes are added. When the notes are added, it's making the poem less interesting. If it's less interesting, then more people are not going to buy it, right? So B is doing nothing but weakening the claim, right? The support should say that more people are going to buy it because of the explanatory notes, and B is doing something bang opposite to it, right? I want the right option to say that there is a possibility of more people purchasing the standalone volume because of the explanatory notes. Let's go to C. The publishers of the standalone volume requested the explanatory notes from the poet in order to make the book attractive to readers who already had a copy of the poem in a journal issue. Now, this tells us that why the explanatory notes can help sell the standalone volume to more people. So even if somebody has read the poem in the quarterly journal, that person will still go ahead and buy the standalone volume because of the notes. Now, this option further proves that the explanatory notes added in the standalone volume is as a marketing strategy, right? So C is already supporting the student's claim, but still I'll have to go ahead and eliminate D. Correspondence between the poet and the publisher reveals that the poet's explanatory notes went through several drafts. Whether the poet's explanatory notes went through several drafts or not is not my concern, right? It's not telling me if the publishers added these notes to make it more, to make the standalone volume more appealing to the audience, right? So the drafts are not the concern over here. It's not related to the claim. It does not tell me if this helps us sell the standalone volume more to people, right? So this is again irrelevant. So we saw a new reason of elimination over here, that is weakening. And the question asked us to support the claim. So weakening is definitely going to be incorrect. This is one more type of a reason that you will find in this question type, right? So C is a correct option and all the other options could be eliminated because of being irrelevant and because it was weakening the claim and not supporting it. Now that we have seen two medium difficulty level questions, we will go ahead and see the hard difficulty level questions. So this is the first hard difficulty level question that we'll be taking up on command of evidence textual. Now this is a literary evidence type of question. So the first step is always going to be the same, that is reading the question stem. Let's read the question stem here. Which quotation from a work by a historian would best illustrate the student's claim? So stating something like best illustrating somebody's claim tells us that this is command of evidence textual question type. And looking at this word quotation, we know that this is about a literary evidence. Now for this, the second step is obviously we go to the text and identify what the student's claim is. So let's read the text. In a research paper, a student criticizes some historians of modern African politics. So this is about a research paper where a student is criticizing some historians. And what is it about? Let's read ahead. Claiming that they have evaluated PL. So it's about these historians' evaluation about PL. Who is this PL? The first prime minister of what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So if you know what a non-essential clause or an essential clause is, you know that this is basically the extra information in between two commas. This is just an extra information describing who PL is, right? Now, if we eliminate this part and read ahead to make a reading and understanding easier, we basically have that claiming that they have evaluated PL primarily as a symbol rather than in terms of his actions. So the problem that student finds in these historians is that they have evaluated PL as a symbol and they have not considered the actions that he had taken in the past, right? So if I have to simply put, we have to find an option that states that PL is being assessed more as a symbolic figure rather than being evaluated based on its practical political actions and accomplishments, right? So this is what the correct option should state, because we are basically supporting the student's claim. In order to support or illustrate his claim, we have to support him, and this is his claim. His claim is basically that the historians have not evaluated PL based on its practical political actions and accomplishments. Now let us go ahead and see our options. Now choice A. PL is or L is a difficult figure to evaluate due to the starkly conflicting opinions he inspired during his life and continues to inspire today. Now, I will stop here itself. When I'm reading this particular option, I'm going to take a pause here. Is a difficult L is a difficult figure to evaluate. Now, is the claim about him being a difficult figure to evaluate? The claim is more about the historians not considering PL's practical actions, right? They're not considering his practical actions. So, this quotation A is basically discussing the challenge of evaluating L because of the conflicting opinions he generated. It highlights that PL inspired a wide range of views both during his life and after his death. So, this particular option touches on the idea that PL's legacy is complex and perhaps symbolic. It does not directly suggest that historians are ignoring his actions, right? There is no such historians ignoring his actions kind of an understanding that we can get from A. So, A is definitely out because this is irrelevant, right? Let's look at B now. So, the available information makes it clear that L's political beliefs and values were largely consistent throughout his career. Now, what is this option trying to say? This quotation is saying or agreeing that PL had a consistent political beliefs and values throughout his career. This focuses on an analysis of his ideological stance. It suggests that there is clarity in understanding what he stood for politically. Right? So, this will suggest that the historian is paying attention to PL's belief and political consistency, not just viewing him as a symbol. So, what is this option B really doing? It's contradicting the text, right? It's contradicting the text by stating that the historians did consider his political achievements, right? So, this is definitely wrong because this is contradicting the student's claim. Let's look at C. PL's or L's practical accomplishments can be passed over quickly. It is mainly as the personification of C independence that he warrants scholarly attention. So, what is this option trying to say? This quotation is the most directly related to the student's critique. It explicitly states that L's practical accomplishments are being downplayed or overlooked. How do I understand that it's talking about downplayed or overlooked? Because it states this phrase passed over quickly. This means that PL's practical accomplishments are being downplayed. And that his main importance to scholars lies in his symbolic role as the embodiment of C independence. This option basically suggests that historians are more interested in what else represents than in evaluating his specific actions and achievements. So, very clearly, this supports whatever the student is claiming in the text. Now, option D, it says many questions remain about L's ultimate vision for an independence Congo. Without new evidence coming to light, these questions are likely to remain unanswered. Now, this quotation discusses the uncertainties surrounding L's long term vision for Congo's independence. It indicates that there are unanswered questions about his intentions and goals, likely because of a lack of sufficient evidence. This is a very neutral kind of a statement, right? It is not about the challenges of understanding his vision, and it doesn't even suggest that he's being reduced to a symbol, right? So it's doing nothing. So this is also out because it's just doing nothing. Again, you can also say that this is irrelevant, right? That some questions are remaining unanswered or being answered is not going to help me understand if historians are thinking lesser of PL, right? So clearly C is the correct choice. Now again, if you were trying to attempt this question in a way where you were directly looking for the right choice, it would have been difficult for you because of this phrase over here, passed over quickly. If you didn't understand the meaning of this phrase, you wouldn't have identified this option as your answer very directly. But if you didn't even know the meaning of this phrase, it would have been fine because you would have eliminated A, B, and D. They're totally irrelevant and one is contradicting the text, right? After the elimination, you would have thought that, okay, this is what I'm left with, so this is most possibly your answer. This is what I'm trying to say when I say that find your right answer with the means of eliminating your options. This is exactly what I'm trying to say. And this particular strategy of eliminating your options and getting to your correct answer is going to be very helpful, especially when you're dealing with the hard difficulty level questions on the SATs, right? So be very mindful of this particular strategy. You have to eliminate your options in order to derive your correct answer. Now, with this, we'll see another example of a hard difficulty level. Alright, so let's see another difficult level question on command of evidence textual type. Let's begin by reading the question stem. Which finding, if true, would most directly support the journalist's claim? So we have to support the journalist's claim, for which we have to read the text to understand what the claim is. So let's read the text now. While attending school in New York City in the 1980s, OE encountered few works by African artists in exhibitions. So this person, OE, when he was attending the school in New York City, found few works by African artists in exhibitions. Despite New York's reputation as one of the best places to view contemporary art from around the world. So New York has a reputation of showcasing contemporary art from everywhere around the world, right? But when OE was there, he found very few works by African artists in exhibitions. Let's see what happened later. According to an art journalist, later in his career as a renowned curator and art historian, he sought to remedy this deficiency. So what is this journalist doing now? So the question stem was about journalist's claim, right? So this is what the claim is, and this is what we need to pay more attention to, because we have to further support it, right? What is the journalist saying? That later in OE's career, as he became a renowned curator and art historian, he did something about the problem of this deficiency, right? Deficiency of not seeing a lot of work by African artists. What was the remedy? Not by focusing solely on modern African artists, but by showing how their work fits into the larger context of global modern art and art history. So basically, the journalist's claim suggests that E's approach was about showing how African art fits within global art movements, rather than isolating it as something separate. So the correct answer, whichever option we pick up, should show that E or OE's work to integrate African art into a broader global art context, demonstrating its relevance and connections to worldwide trends. Right? Now, with this understanding, let's go to our options and see if we can eliminate some. Okay, let's look at A. As curator of the HDK in Munich, Germany. So, the problem here in all the options you'll see is that they have used a lot of difficult names. And the moment you start trying to pronounce all of them, you are going to get trapped in, right? So don't try and pronounce all these names. Just understand what they are and move on. So as curator of something in Munich, E organized a retrospective of G sculptor whatever's work entitled This. This was the name of the work, right? And whose work was it? This person's work. L whatever's work, right? Now, what is this option really saying? This option is highlighting that E organized a major retrospective focused on a specific African artist, this artist, right? Which was a significant event in European art history. This exhibition was a large-scale dedication to a single African artist, emphasizing the importance of this person's work in the broader art world, right? But is that what we are trying to show? Is that what the journalist's claim was? Was it focused around one person? No, right? This particular option shows that this OE was focused on one particular person, on one particular African artist, rather than integrating African art into a broader global context. So that is why this is an incorrect option, because this is focused only on one artist, right? Let's go to B now. In the exhibition post-war, and this is basically the name of the exhibition, right? E and co-curator KS brought works by African artists such as MN together with pieces by major figures from other countries like US artist Andy and Mexico's David. Now, what is this option doing? This option describes an exhibition where OE co-curated a show that included works by African artists alongside works by major international artists such as Andy and David from different places, right? From the US and from Mexico. So the exhibition focuses on art produced between 1945 and 1965, a significant period in modern art. That is what this option is saying, right? This option is directly supporting the journalist's claim. It directly illustrates how OE sought to integrate African art into a global narrative by placing African artists alongside internationally renowned artists from other parts of the world. Right? So that makes this the correct option. But again, like I always say, we've got to eliminate our options before we pick one up and move ahead. Right? So let's look at C. So it says that N's work as curator of the 2001 exhibition, The Short Century, Independence and Liberation Movements in Africa, 1945 to 1994, showed how African movements for independence from European colonial powers following the Second World War profoundly influenced work by African artists of the period, such as these. Okay, it's a very long option, right? Now, what are we going to do this? We are going to break this down into parts so that we better understand it, right? So if you look at this option, this is a very, very lengthy option. What we need to do is we need to break it down. So Enziber's work as curator of the 2001 exhibition, this is the name of the exhibition, right, showed how African movements for independence from European colonial powers following the Second World War profoundly influenced work by African arts of the period. Now, this is the main crux. This option is basically focused on an exhibition that explored the influence of African independence and liberation movements, right, from a certain period to another period. It specifically highlights how these historical movements shaped the work of African artists. It is about African art within the context of African political history rather than its place in global art history. So this is also out. Now, choice D, he organized the exhibition, the name of the exhibition, to the present, not to emphasize a particular aesthetic trend, but to demonstrate the broad range of ways in which African artists have approached the medium of photography. Now, very clearly, this option describes an exhibition curated by E that focuses on the African photographers, right? It's focused on the African photographers. The exhibition aimed to show the diversity of approaches to photography among African artists rather than emphasizing a specific artistic trend. It focuses on exploring the variety within African photography itself, rather than supporting the idea that he was integrating African art into a global context. So again, this is also out for that reason, right? This is also irrelevant. Basically, if you look at this, these two options are totally irrelevant, right? Now, the most important, the most tricky part of this particular question was that the options are very lengthy. They had difficult names, long, lengthy names of the exhibitions. And the moment you start reading all of it and try and get into the every word that's given, you will lose time and also you will get confused. So the main part or main method to attempt this particular question with such lengthy options would be to divide your options into parts and read slowly. You don't have to read the whole name of the exhibitions as well, right? You can simply say that E organized the exhibition, this is the name of the exhibition, not to emphasize. Focus on the main parts of the options rather than reading the whole option and the whole names of the exhibitions given over here, right? So I hope you understood how to take this up. That's it for today's video, SAT Warriors. I hope you're feeling more confident about tackling those command of evidence textual questions. To make sure all this information sticks, don't forget to download the notes on this question type. I have put the link right in the description box below. But wait, there's more. If you're serious about acing the SATs, I have also included a link to a free SAT mock test. It is a great way to assess where you stand and what areas you need to work on. And if you want to stay on top of your game every single day, join my community. By joining, you'll get free access to a daily digital SAT English quiz where I post new questions daily, introduce new vocabulary words that often show up on the SAT, and share tips to help you crush the English section. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on this. So download the notes, take the mock test, and be sure to join the community. Let's conquer the SAT together. Thank you.